I think there's got to be a good story to tell between episode 3 and episode 4. There's got to be some great story there. If we took this character that people know and love from Alec Guinness as this wise, old, sage, powerful, spiritual man, the work that I did in 1 to 3, from a trainee Jedi Padawan to somebody sitting on the Jedi Council with Yoda, you know, we take him to a broken place, that he's faithless and broken. That would be interesting. That would be a good, interesting place to start.
Before I ever saw a single frame, my first introduction to Star Wars was this line.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
One of the kids in my classroom had said it, and my reaction was, "What's an Obi-Wan?" And that's the first time I ever heard Star Wars uttered. I think even with his limited appearances in the original trilogy, Obi-Wan always interested me. Portrayed brilliantly by Alec Guinness, old Obi-Wan was not only wise, but his years of experience clearly reflected a deep history that wasn't outright expressed. Obi-Wan felt at the center of everything we were experiencing through Luke's eyes. Plus, you have to give it to him and Vader for having the first ever lightsaber duel in the franchise. This duel only cemented Obi-Wan as the best character for me because at this point, Vader scared the hell out of me. So to see Obi-Wan hold his own against Vader, it gave him this underdog appeal, something that sticks with the character throughout the franchise. It ends with Obi-Wan letting Vader strike him down, which again showed that there were bigger things happening from a perspective that was unclear to us at the time. Alec Guinness set the bar, and Ewan McGregor would later give the character new life in the prequels. He made Obi-Wan even more of a badass, while also portraying a more vulnerable side to the character. There's no denying that the standout character from the prequels is Obi-Wan. I mean, just look at the memes.
Hello there.
The Clone Wars animated series only cements Obi-Wan as the greatest Star Wars character of all time. Not only does the show deepen the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin, making their friendship more heartfelt, but it makes him more of an endearing character. It's only here where you realize just how much loss actually torments the character. He lost his master. He lost the love of his life, whom he never got a chance to be with. He lost his way of life. He lost countless friends. Even his arch rival dies in his arms. And the final nail in the coffin being that his Padawan and best friend has now turned evil. Obi-Wan feels the guilt of letting down so many people, and that shatters his faith in the Force. That's where we leave this character around the time of Revenge of the Sith. Then, years later in A New Hope, he's more in tune with the Force than ever before, showing that no matter how many times he's been struck down, he always manages to become more powerful than anyone could ever imagine. It's simply great character storytelling. Yet, that always begged the question, how did Obi-Wan go from his lowest low to his highest high? As a fan, it always felt like there was a missing chapter in this character's journey that made sense to tell. How does Obi-Wan restore his faith in himself? After years of hoping and rumors of a movie, finally, Obi-Wan Kenobi aired on Disney Plus as a 6-episode limited series as of the time of recording. Rumors have it that we might get a season 2. Anyway, I cannot express how excited I was for this show. Out of all the Disney Plus shows ever to be released up until this point, this is the one that I felt had the most potential in telling one of the most endearing stories in all of Star Wars. To give a swan song to a beloved character with an actor we never expected to see don the Jedi robes again. But not only that, Hayden Christensen, who played Anakin Skywalker, would be returning to play Darth Vader for the rematch of the century. It was clear Lucasfilm and Disney wanted to give the fans what we waited for. But as for the 6 episodes they gave us, well, I'm sure you already read the title. Having Obi-Wan be in a position where he must confront his failures through the course of 3 films and an animated series allows for this show to incorporate tons of emotional stakes that propels the narrative forward. But oddly enough, the show chooses to focus on a plot-driven narrative that quickly becomes stagnant. Obi-Wan is tasked with rescuing Princess Leia from the Empire, and that's the main call to action Obi-Wan is faced with. By the end of Episode 2, he achieves this goal, and by this point he discovers Anakin is still alive. To Obi-Wan, Anakin is his greatest failure, so it feels as though the show will take this character beat and shift the story towards how Obi-Wan deals with this revelation. Yet, Episode 3 just focuses on Obi-Wan and Leia hanging out on the sand planet. Towards the end, Vader confronts Obi-Wan for a quick lightsaber duel. Obi-Wan's reunion with his fallen Padawan isn't of his own tuition, making the whole scenario feel circumstantial, and Obi-Wan feels like a very passive character in regards to the plot. By the end, Leia is captured again, and Obi-Wan is left to rescue her again, which happens fairly quickly by the end of Episode 4. Mind you, Vader is barely in Episode 4, and it's clear by this point that his relationship with Obi-Wan isn't the focus of the show. Episodes 5 and 6 are also very similar in plot, having the freedom fighters put in a dangerous situation with the Empire. Obi-Wan basically surrenders only for it to lead to a big fight, then everybody escapes. The same plot keeps reoccurring, and if the narrative is only being propelled by the plot, then it becomes abundantly clear that nothing is really happening. Which makes me question, what's the point of this show? Everything leads to Obi-Wan and Vader's rematch of the century, and admittedly, it's the best scene in the entire show. Obi-Wan and Vader actually have a meaningful conversation that develops Vader more into his role as a villain, while also giving Obi-Wan the resolution he needs to forgive himself. The only issue is that this happens in the final episode, and the other 5 don't spend any time progressing Obi-Wan's character to this point, and it doesn't do it in a way that makes the overall experience worth it. Personally, I think what would have made for a more engaging story is if we followed Obi-Wan as he attempted to bring Anakin back to the light side upon discovering he's still alive. This would have done 3 things. Firstly, it would have made Obi-Wan an active protagonist, and all the more interesting as his want to redeem Anakin would have conflicted with his need to let go of the past and simply forgive himself. Secondly, it would have made the plot less stagnant as Obi-Wan's objectives would have expanded past just saving Leia over and over again. Again, the choice to redeem Vader would be an active decision based on the revelation that Anakin is still alive. Thirdly, it would have added to the overarching story of the original trilogy in a more organic way. 2 lines always stuck out to me. This,
"He's more machine now than man, twisted and evil."
and this.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do. You don't know the power of the dark side.
These lines convey that there was a point in time when Obi-Wan tried to redeem Anakin, but failed. As of what we got, Obi-Wan never tries to redeem Anakin. Every time they meet in the show, Obi-Wan's reaction is to fight him. Like I mentioned earlier, they really only have a conversation in Episode 6. This is really uncharacteristic with the show's narrative as Obi-Wan is haunted by killing Anakin. So why would he just try to do it again? Which brings me to my next point. The characters don't make choices based on what they would do, rather what the plot needs them to do for the narrative to progress. Obi-Wan has to want to fight Vader so we could have the rematch of the century. Even if you look back as early as Episode 1, Obi-Wan's call to action by the end doesn't really feel natural. Again, it plays more towards the passivity of his character and need for the show to happen. Bail Organa asks him to go save Leia, and Obi-Wan denies. Then in the next scene or so, Bail Organa asks again, and Obi-Wan agrees. except there's no explicit reason for Obi-Wan's shift in decision making, other than it's the end of the episode and we need the plot to progress by this point. And there's a lot of instances throughout the show where things like this happen. Vader is so powerful that he could use the Force to slam a speeding spaceship, so why doesn't Vader just use the Force to pull Obi-Wan back through the fire? Oh, so Obi-Wan could escape. Why doesn't the Stormtroopers, Inquisitors, and Vader run around the fire and chase Tala, Ned B, and Obi-Wan? Like, they just let them get away. Oh, so the three of them could escape. Why doesn't Vader and the Grand Inquisitor kill Reva when they find out she's a traitor? Oh, because we need her to hunt Luke in the final episode. Why does Leia run up to these strangers? Oh, because she needs to get kidnapped for the plot to happen. Why does Bail Organa leave Obi-Wan a recorded message that exposed Luke and Leia as Skywalkers? Furthermore, why does Haja not pick it up after dropping it? I mean, it's right there on the floor. He just stops and looks at it. Oh, so Reva can find the message and be able to go after Luke. Why doesn't Obi-Wan learn from his mistakes at the end of episode 3 and just kill Vader by the end of the show? Well, because then the original trilogy can't happen. God, I feel like I'm nitpicking, but it happens often enough to the point where these characters don't feel genuine. They do and act however the plot needs them to, rather than what makes the most sense for that given character to do at that given moment. Which is weird for me to say because the beauty and poeticism of Star Wars comes from the sincerity of its characters. Hell, the best stories in general are propelled by the choices the characters make and how those choices affect the world around them.
I guess it comes down to a simple choice, really. Get busy living, or get busy dying.
Film is a visual medium. Star Wars has always thrived on telling stories through shot composition. Take this scene from Revenge of the Sith, for example. A single word isn't said between Anakin and Padme. They're not even in the same room together. Yet, the way the cinematography lingers on these two, it conveys a shared sense of dread and longing for something good to happen. As the sun sets, so does Anakin's descend into the dark side. On one hand, you could feel the love between these two characters, and on the other, you could feel the tragedy that is about to happen because of Anakin's decision. It's a key moment in the prequels and honestly a standout of the entire franchise. But it's also just one example of how visually engaging Star Wars could get. There's a list of examples I would have loved to use to prove this point, but then this video would get off track and become like an hour long. So what you're seeing flash on your screen right now are the remaining examples. Anyway, my point is, Obi-Wan is, for the most part, visually dull and lacks the flair a majority of previous installments in the franchise have. I've heard people call it cheap looking, and although I don't disagree, I don't think that's the initial problem because something that has a cheap budget, like John Carpenter's Halloween, which only had a $325,000 budget, still has visual atmosphere that is still replicated to this day. The real issue is that the show just lacks creativity. In my last video essay, I talked about 12 Angry Men, and how a creative director can make a movie set entirely in one room, still visually engaging for the entire runtime. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan couldn't do it with multiple planets at its disposal. I mean, just look at the Inquisitor base in Obi-Wan. It looks really gray and boring. Now look at the Inquisitor base in Jedi Fallen Order. One is vastly more engaging to look at than the other. Every set feels vastly open and it makes it hard to determine a spatial awareness. At worst, some action set pieces appear cringy, and at best, they don't really feel energetic. Hate the sequels all you want, but an inexperienced Finn dueling Kylo Ren is visually more appealing and energetic than an out-of-touch Obi-Wan dueling Darth Vader. Even the duel on Mustafar is far more visually spectacular than the dark and gray rematch we get in Episode 6. If you're a fan of the channel, you would know that I recently started making videos where I build and review LEGO sets. My most anticipated set of this year was based on rumors about the Vader and Obi-Wan duel. But after seeing it officially, I don't feel as though it's worth the $50 because it's so bare in detail and has a lame aesthetic. I saw a lot of LEGO fans blame LEGO, and I don't at all blame them, because they're just adapting a scene that's vastly open, colored gray, and has no depth. So if the LEGO diorama is boring to look at, then what does that say about the scene it's based on? While I'm talking about duels, this brings me to my last criticism of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's that this show is devoid of any tension. I don't think I'm wrong when saying a staple of Star Wars are the lightsabers. The first ever lightsaber duel showed us that just one strike can kill a character. Throughout the series, lightsaber duels have always felt tense, because the lightsaber itself is a dangerous weapon. It could slice through limbs with ease. It kills powerful beings with the simplest of blows. And just a touch from it can burn the body. Yet, in Obi-Wan, the show manages to make lightsabers feel harmless. The Grand Inquisitor gets stabbed, survives. Reva gets stabbed as a youngling, survives. Reva gets stabbed again by Darth Vader in the exact same way she did before, and survives. The one weapon that's unique to the entire franchise is made to be as harmful as the plot needs it to be. That notion alone takes any and all stakes out of any action scene the show provides, including the infamous rematch of the century. I guess you could make the argument that of course there isn't any tension because it's a prequel. We already know that Obi-Wan, Leia, Luke, and Vader will survive. To that point, I'd argue that in order to make a prequel series layered with suspenseful drama, you have to keep its focus on the journey and development of its characters, which I've already expressed that it doesn't. I don't really know how to end my thoughts on the series. I think it's apparent by this point that we'll get a season 2 somewhere down the line. And if I'm being honest, I don't know if I'm gonna watch it. Everything I wanted to see, this show did, but just executed it poorly. And quite frankly, I don't know how to feel about the future of these Disney Plus shows. A majority of these shows share the same problems of standardization and drive the pushed content out as a product rather than creative endeavors. Yeah, you'll get your occasional gems like The Mandalorian, Ms. Marvel, and Loki. But with the excessive output, you'll get far more Book of Boba Fett's, Obi-Wan Kenobi's, Moon Knight's, Hawkeye's, What Ifs, and dozens upon dozens of more on the way. And that just makes me sad. I know there's an audience for these shows, and I didn't make this video with the hopes to infringe on or change how you feel. I would much rather agree with you because I've lived with this stuff since I was a little kid. But I also can't sit here and say that same awe, that same wonder, that same passion is still there. I had hoped that Obi-Wan Kenobi had something meaningful to say about the character, but in the end it was just underwhelming.